choices shape our futures. The future of businesses, economies, careers, and our world. Insights illuminate better choices, allowing us to see differently and do more. At KPMG, we know insights reveal new opportunities. With us, you have the people and technologies to uncover insights and turn them into action, so you can innovate and transform, so trust can grow, and a more sustainable future becomes possible. When we act on insight, with the right people by our side, opportunity is everywhere. Let insights reveal new opportunities.
Have you assessed your company's readiness for ESG reporting? A strong reporting strategy helps you tell your story to all stakeholders. If you're not telling it proactively, the raters, indexes, investors, and the marketplace are going to tell it for you. Demonstrating credibility to your stakeholders is important to meet investor expectations, remain competitive, and lead among your peers. Understanding where you are on your journey is key to being one step closer to meaningful reporting. When we think about a company's ESG journey, we think about it through the following phases. Establish your reporting strategy to meet the demands of the regulators, your investors, and stakeholders. Assess by gaining an understanding of how your governance, processes, and controls stack up against leading practices. Design and implement best practices to drive rigorous and timely reporting. Sustain the quality of the data through ongoing monitoring and testing. Assure timely and rigorous ESG reporting. No matter where you are on your journey, KPMG is prepared to help you with your sustainability reporting. Find out how. Contact us, your ESG Advantage, KPMG.
Corporate success is no longer solely defined by profit, but also by your impact on society and the environment. Which is why sustainability reporting is so important. Showing how your company is acting with purpose and contributing to a better future. KPMG's 2022 Global Survey of Sustainability Reporting reviews 5,800 companies across 58 countries and jurisdictions. It charts the progress being made, as well as identifying areas for improvement. The survey covers issues such as decarbonisation targets and reporting on climate-related risks, carbon reduction and biodiversity. For the first time, the survey also covers reporting on social and governance risks. Today's investors take non-financial data just as seriously as financial data. And those companies that report effectively are also likely to manage sustainability risks better and deliver greater long-term value. Discover the Big Shifts, Small Steps report on home.kpmg/sustainability reporting to explore the 2022 sustainability reporting trends.
Hi Suresh.
Hi sir.
The budget presentation has just been concluded. What are your views on the budget?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, part to the budget has been very interesting. We saw changes to the income tax law and also changes to the VAT also. Now, in the parliament, we witnessed another very interesting set of proposals. I think we need to discuss with our audience and the panel to dissect this set of proposals.
Let's join our eminent panel and audience and commence the budget forum.
Hello and a very good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, you join as Sri Lanka is at an unprecedented moment in history for its economy. We have challenges that we've never faced before. As Mr. Johan Perera and Mr. Suresh Perera just pointed out, the budget reading just completed in Parliament with the President, Ranil Wickremesinghe, in his role as the Honourable Minister of Finance, presenting the appropriation bill, the second reading of the appropriation bill to Parliament. Well, we at KPMG are in the midst of celebrating 125 years as a trusted professional services firm. And our professional teams are ready to analyze and discuss and present to you some of the highlights of this budget, ladies and gentlemen. And well, Sri Lanka stands poised at the start of a long, long road ahead to recovery. And we hope that these budget proposals and all that it means will take us there. So, along with our managing partner, Mr. Johan Perera, and our head of tax and regulatory, Mr. Suresh Perera, we at KPMG are ready to take you on an insightful discussion before Sri Lanka begins its journey on this road to resilience and recovery. Good evening to you both, gentlemen. Do you think we are going to go on this road to resilience and recovery? Over to you.
Thank you, Nipuni. Welcome everybody to the KPMG Budget Analysis 2023, and of course, in particular, wish to welcome our eminent panel of experts who have accepted our invitation to be with us and share their thoughts on the implication of the budget proposals on the various sectors. KPMG traditionally held budget analysis event as a physical event in the morning following the budget presentation for over 2 decades. But due to the changed circumstances in the country, we are bringing to you the budget analysis in the evening following the budget presentation in Parliament virtually from our office in Colombo for the 3rd consecutive year. Over to you, Suresh.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everybody. This afternoon, we had the opportunity of listening to President Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe presenting the budget speech in the Parliament. Second reading of the appropriation bill, to be precise. And without any delay, let's listen to the summary of the budget proposals being presented by Ms. Rifka Ziad, the tax director in charge of the KPMG division.
Thank you very much. Well, as you heard, it is quite a stir that this budget has caused. I suppose it would be fair to say that this is the first time such a stir has been caused by the budget. So Rifka, our director tax, Rifka Ziad, is hoisted and ready to bring you the budget highlights after the appropriation bill reading tonight. Over to you, Rifka.
Thank you, Nipuni. A warm welcome to the panelists and also to the audience who must be very interested to know what the proposals are. I think there was a lot of fear in there that there are going to be 4 new taxes to be introduced, because there was some news about a land tax, property tax, estate taxes, wealth taxes. Well, I have some good news. Those taxes are not there, so don't worry about that. But of course, like Suresh said earlier, there are interesting tax facts and also certain administrative provisions as well. So let me just take you through what those hold. First of all, what is this budget 2023 about as per the President? It is about a Sri Lanka going towards a new beginning, building a new economy suitable for the modern world. What is the focus? There were 3 focus areas he focused on: an export-oriented economy, an environmental friendly green and blue economy, a digital economy. So discussions around this, I think Mr. Johan Pereira will lead through in the panel discussion. I will also take you through certain facts that he mentioned about the goals, the economy, what are the goals that are set for the medium term. A high economic growth of 7 to 8%, increase in the international trade as a percentage of GDP by more than 100%, annual growth from new exports, I think up to $3 billion in the next few years, and of course FDIs more than $3 billion in the next 10 years, and of course creation of an internationally competitive workforce in the next 10 years. So these were part of, I think, an overall focus of the budget. I think the panelists will discuss in detail as to whether we can reach these goals. I will just now move towards the revenue area. So what is that? At the end of the day, the government's revenue is mainly on the tax revenue. There are certain non-tax revenue proposals and of course grants. So at the moment with this budget, there is an increase of 1,321 billion from total revenue and grants, and that is 63% increase. So what are the non-tax revenue proposals that has been proposed? Let me take you through that before I move to my expert area of tax. Increase of fees and charges of 20% with effect from 2023. I think he gave a promise that for the past years it will not be charged, it will be only for the future. And also there is a proposal to examine the royalty, rent and other non-tax revenue charged and collected by the government. He's going to have a commission in place to have a look at these. And of course there was a requirement for daily transfer of all the revenue and receipts by the ministries to the general treasury. So these were some of the non-tax revenue proposals. Let me go into the tax revenue proposals, which is, I'm sure, everybody's interest. So the total tax revenue at the moment, as per the budget, the increase that is forecasted is 69%. So from 1,852 billion in 2022, based on the revised estimates, it is estimated to increase up to 3,130 billion. Now, how is it going to be done? From income tax, it will be 912 billion. Taxes on goods and services will be 1,763 billion, and of course taxes on external trade 455 billion. So this is the 3 main components, and some of these proposals for income tax and VAT, as you know, has already been part and parcel of the bills that have been recently issued. So now let me move towards what are the tax proposals. Now there are income tax increases that are expected. So what is this? As far as the budget proposal is concerned, it mainly spoke about an exemption that has been granted for income earned by a non-resident person who will be working in government-approved projects by the Ministry of Finance, which is fully funded by foreign grants. So this was an exemption that has been given. For the public sector employees, well, it's not so much of a good news. With effect from 1st January 2023, the President has requested the employer not to bear the taxes, or the personal taxes, or the payee or the APIT taxes. So that will be a burden on the employee. Of course, administrative review, this has been under a lot of discussion in the recent past because of certain amendments that were proposed in the bill itself. But here, the Commissioner General time period to hear an appeal was 7 months under the current law for the administrative review purposes. That has been now increased for 2 years, and that will be effective from 1st April 2023. And also, there is clarification that CGIR decision, if not notified within the 2-year period, it means that the admin review has been allowed. This has been introduced mainly, if you remember, in the income tax bill. It is said in case the Commissioner General does not issue the determination or the decision, it is up to the taxpayer to move to the next stage, that is the Tax Appeals Commission. But here, within that 2-year period, if the Commissioner General does not issue the decision, it is confirmed to be in favor of the taxpayer. So I guess that might be good news, but then the time period of 2 years, I would like to take that as for discussion whether this 2-year period isn't that too long. And And of course, clarity has been given on the dividend income. If you remember, in the amendment bill, there were certain proposals in relation to the dividend, where it was said that dividend to a non-resident was liable from 1st October 2022. Withholding on dividends, which is paid to a resident, paid by a resident company, 15% withholding was introduced from the commencement of the Act. And the dividend income rate, which is like 14%, during that time period would be increased to 30% from 1st October, because the amendment or the withholding tax rate, which was a final tax, was only introduced from the commencement of the Act. So during this period, there is a lack of, will we end up paying 30% for dividend? Now, to clarify all that, they have mentioned from 1st October 2022 up to the time of commencement of the amending Act, the non-resident parties will continue to be exempt. The dividend received by the resident will be 15%. So you are paying 14%, you will be paying 15%. And of course, the pass-through dividend exemption has been given. So this is just for clarity in between this time period until the bill is passed into law. Other than that, there was nothing specifically in the budget in relation to income tax. So in the Inland Revenue Bill, you would already recall the personal income taxes were revised, the slabs were revised, there was a reduction in the personal relief, expenditure relief was removed, and of course the reintroduction of APIT and withholding tax. So those proposals will have to be passed into law, which will be done in the next few weeks. As far as corporate income tax, again this is from the bill. As you remember, there was a revision of the tax rate from 14 to 30%. The capital gains tax rate was increased up to 30%. Certain exemptions were removed and mandatory AIT and WHT was introduced. So those were the proposals. So altogether, with this only, that more than 60% income tax increase the government is trying to achieve. As far as VAT is concerned, there was again a clarification saying that most of the exemptions will be removed with effect from 1st April 2023. And the President also made a reference saying that the revenue foregone due to these VAT exemptions is more than 1% of the GDP. And that is why these revenue exemptions are being removed. And of course, there is also idea, or they are planning on consolidating the Value Added Tax Act. As you know, the Act was introduced in 2002. So after about 20 years, now with the 2022 amendments, they are trying to issue a consolidated act, which was the same for Inland Revenue Act also, the 2000 Act. Thereafter in 2006, there was a consolidated version. So this is a consolidated version, a VAT Act will be issued. As far as the Inland Revenue Bill was concerned, there were two specific VAT proposals. One was the VAT rate threshold change, and of course the exemption on the supply of condominium residential accommodation. Now I think as per the Supreme Court determination, it will be effective from 1st December. And already the VAT rate change is already in place by way of the Gazette. As you know, we are at 15% at the moment. So these are all part and parcel of the estimated revenue from VAT. Social Security Contribution Levy, the new tax that was introduced few months ago, an exemption has been granted for importation of motor vehicles and equipment used by differently able persons. These exemptions were already there under NBT, so the same has been now given under Social Security Contribution Levy. So that's a good thing, it's an exemption, so don't worry. As far as the Betting and Gaming Levy Act and a Casino Business Registration Act, I think there was a lot of talk just before the budget that from the sin industries there will be some taxes. So as far as the bookmaker definition is concerned in the Betting and Gaming Levy Act, there has been an amendment to ensure that a person who's carrying out any type of bets, including online betting, will be now identified as a bookmaker for the Betting and Gaming Levy Act. Because I think initially or up to now, only the horse racing was included. So this is like an expansion of that. And there will be a fee and for a license, and this license has to be issued, and the license has to be registered with the Inland Revenue Department. So there you can see there's a connection now. And also, if by any chance these businesses do not get a license, it is a punishable offence. And as far as the Casino Business Regulations Act is concerned, again, online gaming has been introduced. Now, few years ago, we remember that online registrations or online travel agents were also supposed to be registered and taxes were being planned to collect from them. I don't think we ever went ahead with those up to now. But now, as far as the casino gaming is concerned, the online casino gaming or even online betting has been introduced, and that has been seen as a way of collecting taxes. But one thing that has been done at the moment is only the Casino Business Regulation Act. The definition has expanded to include online casino. But if taxes have to be collected, then an amendment has to be brought into the Betting and Gaming Levy Act. We did not see that in the technical notes, so maybe Tanuja can explain to us later whether that will be covered, because if not, you will have the activity being included, but how do you collect the taxes? Then the Tax Appeals Commission Act. I think this Tax Appeals Commission, a lot of appeals being I think bogged down at the Tax Appeals Commission has been under discussion. So now, I don't know if it's a way of discouraging, but there has been changes in the fees. So if you were intending to go to the Court of Appeal after the Tax Appeals Commission determination was given, the fee was only 1,500, but now it has been increased to 10,000. And if you wanted to make an appeal to the Tax Appeals Commission after the Commissioner General issued the determination or the admin review decision, the charge was only 2,500. It has been increased to 15,000. Maybe, is this like, do you have to pay for all this, and should it be such a high amount? Maybe Suresh can also discuss this a little bit further as well, because for bank guarantees also, it goes on to say that the bank guarantee has to be valid till the end of the appeal, but more than that, even if the taxpayer, in case the taxpayer loses the case at the Tax Appeals Commission and the taxpayer wants to appeal to the Court of Appeal, there's a provision that has been brought in to say that still the bank guarantee will be claimed in favor of the Commissioner General, even if the taxpayer has the intention to go to Court of Appeal. So whether this is a violation of natural justice, I'll leave it to Suresh to discuss in the panel session. As far as import taxes are concerned, a surcharge tax has been introduced on diesel, petrol, crude oil at the point of importation. So of course the importer has to pay, but of course whether that will get passed on to you and me, we'll have to wait and see. But a price increase was indicated recently by media. It may be because due to this surcharge tax. Import taxes in relation to customs duty, there is a tariff change proposed. So we have now the new proposed tariff range will be 0%, 15% and 20%. And in addition to that, the unit rate that is there, usually there is a percentage and a unit rate for customs duty, that will be re-looked at for customs duty purposes and the cess purposes, and that will be effective from 15th November. So you better check, in case you are looking at the old rates, better check, there is a proposal to change that rates as well. And of course the HS code 2022 version will be adopted from 1st January 2023. As far as motor vehicles are concerned, there was, I think there has been basic issues in relation to clearance, maybe due to the past issues we've had, and there has been a lot of motor vehicles held up at the customs. So these seized vehicles where taxes were not paid can be released now if the taxes are paid. Usually seized vehicles are not given again to the same importer, but here the proposal seems to be, if the taxes are paid, that it will be released to the importer. Commercial hub regulation, I think the President also spoke a lot about making it a hub, and certain things have been done in relation to that. The hub regulations now will be a consolidated version. I think just like the VAT tax, there will be a consolidated version coming in. And the service, I think the expansion of the scope, if you remember, there are about 4 areas that is covered under the hub regulation. Now even bunkering services will be included into that. And SSCL, that is Social Security Contribution Levy of 2.5%, exemption has been granted if you are a hub related company. And if enterprises who are in the hub regulation, if they are identified as an STP, then they will be eligible for exemptions granted under the STP, but they need to get the STP status. Measures to improve tax administration. So there was a lot in relation to tax administration. So I'll touch upon certain things. Establishment of the Presidential Commission on Taxation, a very important thing. I think we've been speaking about the National Tax Council, bringing together experts. So this may be not that, maybe towards that, because the President spoke of the Presidential Commission of Taxation coming up with certain recommendations. So we need to wait and watch. A tax ombudsman, I think very important at the moment with the lot of complaints that are there as well, and it helps the taxpayer, will also be appointed. A charter covering rights and obligations of the taxpayer will be introduced. I think it should be a warm welcome, because rights of the taxpayer has been under discussion a lot now. A list of active VAT registered persons will be published in the Inland Revenue website. If you know, at the moment, I think they have the inactive list of VAT registrations and the SVAT, RIP and RIS. So now they are going to introduce the active ones as well. And mandatory e-filing will be introduced. Now at the moment it is for the corporates, it will be extended to non-corporate taxpayers as well. So everybody needs to be geared up to register with the Inland Revenue. And of course there is a risk-based audit going to happen with all revenue collections. So these are all, I think, more efficiency improvements within the revenue collection authorities have been introduced. And we could see that the digitalization effort also has been spoken about. Bringing revenue collecting agencies together, linking them also has been stressed upon, and also there will be a mechanism to collect relevant information for tax purposes from different entities. And also, I think this was very interesting, introducing KPIs for the revenue authorities. A lot has been discussed around it, so it has been proposed here. We'll have to wait and watch how efficient it will be. And of course, introduction of legislative amendments to improve tax efficiency is also spoken of. And there's again a proposal to encourage as much as possible bank card transactions and not to avoid or discourage cash transactions. This is mainly because this is being used for evade taxes. That's the reference made in the budget proposal. So this is what, in short, what the tax administrative proposals are. So the budget focus, as far as the taxes are concerned, what did the budget say? We are looking at an enhancement of tax to GDP from 7.8% to 10.3% or 10.3 tax to GDP, which is something very close to what a very developed nation would have. It's a good, it can go much further, but this is a real leap for Sri Lanka to look at 7.8 to 10.3. So maybe we could discuss this in the panel discussion, whether all these proposals, is it good enough to achieve this? Are we on the right track? Will all these measures to collect revenue will come through? Well, we'll need to wait and watch. So with that, I will end my proposal, and I'm also looking forward to the discussion with the eminent panelists. Over to you, Nipuni.
Thank you very much, Rifka, and a very big thank you to the entire team of KPMG tax professionals who backed Rifka up to bring you those very interesting and wide-ranging highlights. But now that you know what the highlights of the budget are, I think it's time that we look at what the analysis is going to be and the impact of the proposals on the various industries. And for that, ladies and gentlemen, we have put together a very eminent list of panelists from various industries across the Sri Lankan economy. Before we go on to that, let me also just ask our panelists to please switch on your cameras for the rest of the discussion. And I'd like to hand over to Mr. Johan Pereira to welcome them all, please.
Thanks, Nipuni. I would like to welcome our eminent panelists once again and say hi to each one of you. We will soon start the discussion, first round of questions. Nipuni?
Before that,
yes.
Quite right. Well, we say they're eminent panelists, but we'd like to introduce each of them to our audience, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope they don't mind that I've taken the liberty of cutting down their very illustrious CVs to a few lines, but we'd like to introduce each one of you in turn. Let's start, ladies and gentlemen, with our first panelist, Mr. Vish Govindasamy, who all of you know is the chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, the country's premier business chamber with a 183-year-old history. but he is also a respected leader, visionary and industry veteran. He has been at the helm of the diversified conglomerate Sunshine Holdings PLC for over 26 years, and he is the group managing director for the moment. And it's one of Sri Lanka's top 50 listed companies. Before his current position at Sunshine Holdings, he was also the CEO of Vatavella Plantations, a diversified plantation management company in partnership with Tata India. Good evening to you, Mr. Vish Govindasamy, and ladies and gentlemen. Our next panelist is Mr. Jonathan Ullis. Good evening to you, sir. Mr. Jonathan Ullis is the Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer of Hatton National Bank PLC, one of Sri Lanka's largest private sector banks. He counts over 35 years of experience in the banking sector, and he has served in several international banks, including the National Bank of Abu Dhabi, Saudi British Bank in Riyadh, the British Bank of the Middle East, and HSBC Dubai, as well as in Colombo, before taking on the reins of H&B. Mr. Ullis is a director of the Sri Lanka Banks Association and was its chairman from 2014 to 2016. In 2018, he was elected chairman of the Asian Bankers Association, a position he held for 3 years, and is currently a member of its board of directors. I'd also like to introduce and welcome Dr. Roshan Pereira. Good evening to you, Dr. Roshan Pereira. She's a public policy specialist with 20 plus years of experience in formulating and implementing monetary and fiscal policy. She also has expertise in regulating and supervising financial institutions and in helping strengthen approaches to managing risks. She was a director at the Central Bank of Sri Lanka and presently is a senior research fellow at the Advocata Institute, an independent policy think tank. She is also an independent consultant to multilateral agencies, both in Sri Lanka and abroad. She currently serves on the boards of Union Bank PLC and Senkadagala Finance PLC. She has also served on many boards, including the Institute of Policy Studies and the Sri Lanka Institute of Directors. I'd also like to now introduce Ms. Shiroma Kure. Ms. Shiroma Kure is the chairman of and managing director of Jetwing Travels Private Limited, one of the leading destination management companies in Sri Lanka. She is also the chairman of Jetwing Hotels Limited, the premier hospitality brand of Sri Lanka, effective October 2018. She's a past chairman of the Sri Lanka Institute of Directors and past president of the Sri Lanka Association of Inbound Tour Operators. With diverse experience in a number of industries, she also holds other directorates in hotels, finance, investment banking, commodity brokering, commercial banking, and insurance companies. We now have Mr. Jehan Perinpanayagam. Good evening to you. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Jehan Perinpanayagam serves as CEO of Informate Private Limited, a leading Sri Lanka-based BPM. Jehan serves as Vice Chair of SLASCOM, Chairman ACCA of the Member Network Panel in Sri Lanka. The other industry roles he holds include President of the Nordic Business Council. He counts 25 years of experience and is a thought leader in BPM and pioneered the concept of rural BPM in Sri Lanka. I'd also like to now welcome Ms. Tanuja Pereira. Ms. Tanuja Pereira joined the Inland Revenue Department in 2007 as an assessor and worked at the Banks and Financial Services Unit and the Secretariat Unit of the department. She was seconded to the Ministry of Finance in 2014 and as the Tax Policy Advisor to the Ministry of Finance attached to the Department of Fiscal Policy. In 2020, she worked at the Large Taxpayers Unit for Banks and Financial Services of the Department of Inland Revenue and rejoined the Ministry of Finance in 2022 and at present is working as a Tax Policy Advisor to the Ministry of Finance. Good evening to you and thank you for joining us. And of course, joining the panel is our very own Head of Tax and Regulatory, Mr. Suresh Pereira, who I have the great pleasure of introducing. I'll just give you a few lines of his illustrious career. Suresh specializes in providing a range of tax services to clients in the financial services, consumer markets and other industry areas, including entry and exit planning, domestic and international taxation, investment structuring, mergers and acquisitions, facilitating regulatory and licensing approvals, and also representations before the appellate authorities. So we have such an eminent panel before us, ladies and gentlemen. Let me hand over to our moderator, none other than our managing partner, Mr. Johan Pereira. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Nipuni. Welcome again, our eminent panel. Let me start the discussions with the first round of questions to our panelists. Vish, let me start with you. Vish, as chairman of Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, you interact with many business sectors and policymakers. Under the current economic conditions, does the budget address the reforms required to drive a recovery, or else what do you see as the biggest challenge that had been addressed for business in Sri Lanka? Which I have a follow-up question. We also know that increased taxes would lead to reduction in funds available for investments by the corporates. Hence, corporates may reduce costs at the expense of growth. Do you think that the policymakers have looked at a balance between growth and reduction in funds available for investments? Over to you, Vish.
Thank you, and good evening, Johan. Thank you very much for having me on the panel this evening. I know it's soon after
Mr. Vishkav, I'm sorry, sir, may I stop you there for a moment? There has been some issue in the voice transmission. We'll come back to you with another question in a moment. Until then, could we, Mr. Johan Pereira, could we refer another question to one of our other panelists? So we will contact you on the technical issue in a moment.
Thank you, Vish. We'll get back to you. Jonathan, next question is for you. The banking sector, as you know, is the backbone of the economy and continues to face various challenges, including debt restructuring. Amid so many uncertainties already faced by the banking sector, other proposals indicate high tax rates of income tax rate at 30%, finance VAT at 18%, and social security levy at 2.5%. How will these impact banking sector stability in terms of liquidity and capital adequacy? Over to you, Jonathan.
Thanks very much for having me. A very good evening to everybody. Firstly, I like to double check, am I audible and can I be heard properly?
Yes.
Very good.
Thanks so much. Yeah. Right. I think a good question from us to start off with. The short answer is a hugely negative impact, Johan. I mean, the fact that taxes are required is known, but there are 2-3 issues surrounding this in terms of, one, we keep talking of broad basing, but it's just rhetoric. We've heard it for decades. We have not seen it happen. The same old people are paying tax over and over again, and then those same old people have also got to endure the gross inconsistency in, every 2-3 years. It's changing so drastically. The peaks and troughs of your tax. One day it is, 12%, 18%, 36%. How do you plan? I mean, how do you sort of provide for, your budgets when, anybody can just come and say, don't we need sort of to simplify taxes? Don't we need to basically have some consistent policy so that, corporates and individuals all can, plan around it? Just a couple of examples on the corporate side. How do we keep adjusting for, salaries of our employees? One day when it's 18, the next day when it's 36. How do you bridge this? And then 2 years later, it just reduces back to 18. Do we just reduce the salaries at that stage? It doesn't happen. And then if you just extend, then this same example on the personal front, I think what you have is a lot of loans have been granted. Taking debt service cover ratios based on, a very reasonable, inflation as well as, taxes at around the 18% mark. And now with, inflation gone horrendously wrong as well as you have taxation at these levels, how do you, all these DSCRs will be breached? How are they going to pay? And then the triple whammy is the interest rates that getting. So it's not. It's fully understood that the government needs to increase its revenue. Revenue to GDP needs to increase, but that was always the case all the time. So we could have, had this consistently going so that we don't need to make these big shifts, which just doesn't lend itself well for planning. I spoke about broad basing. We also speak about, super gains tax and ill-gotten wealth. It's just to see, do we really know those who have ill-gotten wealth? Do they, first of all, forget about paying tax? Do we know what their ill-gotten wealth is? Are there any plans to get them back on board? Or is it the same old people who are going to be hammered in order to basically, support the rest of the economy? And it's important as we drive taxes significantly higher, as Rivka mentioned, in order to, the numbers look very impressive, but they must then be channeled into the right areas, which has been hitherto, not done. So Johan, the tax part is just one aspect. So then with the tax, what we're also looking at, with this potential government debt restructuring program, we're just bracing ourselves for what could happen with regard to ASBs. There is much talk about, DDRs, about domestic debt restructuring. And then the real, danger is for us in terms of the moratoriums coming to an end. And with that, which is not a bad thing. And with that, with this inflation and interest rates being at these levels, I think we are looking at credit impairments, which have all these time being kind of hidden, and we have been in denial. Now it's suddenly beginning to surface. There were some presentations this morning also where basically people were talking of doing their statistical models to show that the current 10% on your stage 3 could even be as bad as 15, and a couple of examples similar to Sri Lanka were given where staging had almost touched 50%, which is really scary, and we need to do these scenarios to see how it's going to impact us. So the combination of basically what's going to happen with the government debt restructure, with the tax and the credit impairments, definitely is going to cause severe liquidity as well as a capital constraint at a time where the economy is at probably its worst it has ever been in Sri Lanka, and it impacts our shareholders who would find it very difficult to put in equity at this particular stage. And this is where we need other types of support mechanisms coming in, which probably I could allude to a little bit later. But just to kick us off, it's concerning, and we as bankers and the industry must get together and make all plans necessary to stay afloat, to stay stable, if we are to play a meaningful role in the revival of the Sri Lankan economy and its people. Maybe I'll pause there, Johan, for the time being.
Our financial year end is coming, it's very close, 31st December, just 6 weeks away, and there is no clarity so far in many of the situation. Yeah. Okay, we come back to you, Jonathan.
Should we go back to Mr. Vishgovindasamy, because we could not hear him initially? There was some technical issue with linking on Teams. I think there was an issue with the voice, so let's just go back to him and maybe refer the question, if that's okay.
Johan, can you hear me?
Yes, we could hear you, Vish. I think you got my question. You can, you want me to repeat the question?
Yeah. No, I think I have the question. So apologies for the voice difficulty. So once again, thanks KPMG for having me here this evening. I think the question was, as the chairman of Ceylon Chamber, under the current economic difficulties, what are the challenges the businesses are facing? I think what I was saying is the businesses are, the challenges are multi-pronged. And I think I heard Jonathan say that I don't think none of us have faced such difficult conditions as we are facing currently. So given that, I think the challenges are that, the inflation, which is beyond 70-80% in given numbers, but I think we all know the number is much higher than that. And the businesses are under severe crunch for working capital management. The working capital costs are in excess of 30%, and the suppliers have all either local or overseas have reduced the credit limits. Now I think the financial institutions will have to reduce the facilities available to businesses as well. So I think more than the big corporates, I think the SMEs are going to feel the pinch. I think there will be lots of SMEs that will go out of business, unfortunately, which will probably add more confusion and more agony to the financial institutions which have lent. So I think the challenges are huge. I don't know whether anyone here will have an answer on how we can overcome this situation, but one has to work very hard. I think our businesses have to tighten. The economy is under contraction. So we are talking about an 8 to 10% contraction at this stage. So I can't see any growth happening on a contraction economy. So you had asked whether the increase in taxes is going to allow us any investment in new businesses, whether the policymakers have done anything for that to happen. I don't think they have any choice. I mean, let me be blunt. I don't think the policymakers have any choice other than the revenue-seeking initiatives that have been put, because without this revenue, I don't think any of us can survive. So I don't think we are in a mood for huge investments by the private sector right now. I think the private sector will be mostly concerned on survival at this stage. If we can survive the next 12 to 18 months, I think the private sector would have done a wonderful job. So I think that summarizes my answers. I hope it's clear.
Thank you, Vish. Let's move on to Roshan. In business, a budget balances income generation with expense optimization. However, the government must address the social aspects as well. Has this budget addressed these issues, and can you highlight some of the key challenges the government has to overcome in the year 2023? And has the budget addressed these challenges? I also have a follow-up question. Do the budget proposals lend credence to the expectation by the IMF for Sri Lanka to overcome the current economic crisis and reach a 2% primary surplus by 2025? Over to you, Roshan.
Okay, good evening, and thank you for inviting me to be on this panel. sort of answer both questions sort of together. But before answering the question, I think it is important to consider the context. I think we've all talked about it in some shape or form, but to really set out the context in which this budget was presented. So basically, the country has an unsustainable level of debt. We know that. Net foreign reserves are negative. Inflation, as Vish indicated, is at unprecedented high levels. We've never seen this kind of inflation rate. And the economy is projected to contract this year, maybe 9 to 10%, and also next year. So basically, we are expecting 2 years of contraction in the economy. In the middle of all that, the government is also in this middle of a debt restructuring exercise with its creditors, and with a program with the IMF to bring this debt back to a sustainable level. So basically, the government has to provide some kind of assurance to the creditors and to the international community that they are taking the necessary steps to get the economy back on track, or actually at least to bring back this macro stabilization of the economy. So all the budget 2023 is formulated in this sort of broader context. So the key priority really in terms of budget 2023 is macro stabilization. That's a short-term objective. In the next year, basically the government, all the efforts has to be on macro stabilization. And from the fiscal point of view, basically what that means is you've got to raise adequate revenues. You may have to rationalize expenditure in order to bring your debt back to this sustainable level. But then how does the government basically formulate this budget? Because it faces very difficult trade-offs in this environment. Right? So which tax policies would raise the most amount of revenue or raise it most efficiently? How do they allocate the scarce resources that they have between multiple objectives or multiple requirements? So when you look at the budget itself, how did the government really address these challenges? As it was indicated, basically the revenue is projected to increase to 10.3% of GDP from 7.8%, which is also the estimate for 2022. We don't really know the actual numbers. So it's an increase of something like 2.5% of GDP. Now that was achieved, yes, in I think 2015 or 16, but it's a huge increase in a contracting economy. When the economy is contracting, to be able to increase revenue by that amount is going to be a huge ask. That's one. And then the budget deficit is to be reduced to 7.9% from 9.8%. Again, a huge reduction in the deficit. Very ambitious target. And as I think Rifka mentioned, tax revenue is projected to increase by 69% or nearly 70% nearly from the budget estimates, and 141% from last year's, so 2021 estimate, or sorry, actual. Right, so it's a huge increase. Now, are these projections realistic? That's what we need to understand. Are they based on the projections for GDP growth, consumption growth, import growth? Because these are really where our taxes come from, right? It's bit on consumption, it's on income, and it's those are our main basis of taxes. So if these are not realistic, then we need to either come up with new proposals, or we'll have to have some kind of further expenditure rationalization. Now, already, if you look at the expenditure, what you see is really, at least I don't see a real sort of granular analysis of expenditure. Looking at it, line by line, and seeing where this expenditure goes to, who are the beneficiaries of this expenditure, and who really benefits from these expenditure proposals, and who bears the cost of these particular fiscal policy actions or tax policy. We don't see that kind of granular analysis. We only see very sort of broad numbers. It's almost like, adding 10% or 15% or whatever to the last year's budget, and you increase your, you get your figures for this year. But I think what we need is really a much more granular analysis. I think that needs to happen. Go back to the drawing board and see where are these expenditures. And another one is the impact assessment. we need to have the impact assessment as well. So I'll just take an example. Say, look at education expenditure. We need to know where the education is being spent. Do it across the school, across universities, or across region, and see actually where this expenditure is going. Is it going to the most, where it is needed most? And then see whether it is actually having the impact, or is it meeting the objectives that we have for education, for skills development that we're talking about, in order to achieve these targets that we have set for growth, for exports, etc., etc. So unless there's a one-to-one mapping between the overall development objectives of this country and realistic assessment of the resources that are required to achieve these objectives, and how these these resources are to be allocated among these different multiple objectives, we are not going to really achieve the envisaged outcomes. Otherwise, again, what you're going to have is these budgets. We are not going to meet these budget targets. But I think and this has been a perennial problem, but I think in the current context, it is, we need to be really careful, because these targets form the basis for the IMF program, getting on the debt restructuring program, the IMF program. So we have to be very realistic about these budget targets. I'll stop there, and maybe we can discuss further in the next round.
Thanks, Roshan. I think even IMF is only working on a revenue consolidation. No one is talking about the expenditure lines. So we'll get back to that later. Yeah, thank you. Next, move on to Shiromal, next panelist. Shiromal, the tourism sector has been facing challenges from Easter attack, followed by the COVID outbreak, and now the economic crisis. Do you think the government has placed adequate focus support the revival tourism sector via required and suitable initiatives? I also have a follow-up question. We find the number of tourists visiting a country is still far below the numbers that visit countries in the region. In your mind, what three key measures the government and tourist industry together should take to increase the tourist arrivals to a substantially higher number?
Yeah, thank you, Suresh, and thank you, KPMG, for having me. Are you on, everyone? Yes, since for the last 36 months, Vish was talking about the next 18 months. We've had issues for the last 36 months, and the government did help by providing the moratorium. There was a moratorium, as you all know, on the capital and the loans. But the issue is, and that really helped to sustain the business. But now, currently, the interest has obviously accumulated, and paying at 30%, 32% on the interest is really killing everybody, and people are really grappling with how to manage their cash flows, and because the income is also not sufficient to pay. So it's a huge problem. But originally, yes, the government did assist by providing moratorium. And now, of course, each one will have to talk to their bankers, like Jonathan, and then hopefully get the loans rescheduled and make sure the payments can be made. Another issue we had in the last 5 to 6 months was the scarcity of resources. For instance, the fuel for generators in the hotels, fuel for transporting goods, services, and even the clients. So I must say the government was very helpful. They did provide through the Tourist Development Authority. They did facilitate it. Then subsequently, they did come out with the fuel pass, which is working quite well now. So I must say, in those areas, the government did facilitate. And even with the COVID situation, the revival was faster. So in those sense, yes, government did make a lot of enablers. But to answer your second question, I do agree. The numbers are low, but the numbers are not low only in Sri Lanka. Right now, if you take Thailand, if you take Malaysia, Singapore, everybody is really suffering. Not Sri Lanka is suffering more, but the other countries are also suffering because post-COVID, the revival has not been that quick. I think the two countries that are really benefiting is the Maldives and the Mauritius. They are really moving, but most of the other countries in Asia are not really doing too well. But so the three things that I would think of is, I think for Sri Lanka, we need to desperately correct the image. At the moment, people, especially whether it's in India, I mean, whether it's Asian or European, they all think that we are still suffering, that we still have queues, we are like, savages burning each other's houses, people don't have food, they are starving. So this image is there, and unfortunately the media, whenever they talk of Sri Lanka, as you know, they keep playing the old footage and people don't really listen. They watch the images and they think we are still bad. So we really desperately need to correct this image. We need to tell people that Sri Lanka is fine now. I mean, with inverted commas, we are fine. We do have the fuel, we do have food, people are not starving. So that message needs to go out if we are to get tourists to come into the country. Another factor would be, I think, also the most of the foreign airlines are still struggling to get their monies out. There's a lot of money due to them, and that cannot be sent out because obviously because of the foreign currency issues, and due to the depreciation, they lost about 40-50% of their earnings. So that's a huge issue, and some are already reducing their frequency. So we need to get them back on track as well. Another important factor, I would think, is that the government must ensure a peaceful and a stable environment. That is very important. And another thing that's coming up is the human rights violations. I hope these things don't get played out. So we should be responsible citizens as well, and make sure that the government must ensure that the human rights are not violated. The forces are properly maybe trained and explained as to how they should handle women, handle normal human beings, so that things will not get out of hand. I think that's enough, Suresh, for the time being.
Thank you, Shiromal. I think there were a lot of other factors that come in. Yeah, that's fully agreed. Thank you. Let's move on to Jehan. Jehan, technology-related services continue to play a vital role in economic growth and contribute significantly through inflow of foreign exchange. How would the proposal to amend the tax exemption impact the industry, and do you think the benefits of this tax may outweigh the costs due to loss of any competitiveness in Sri Lanka had in this industry?
Thank you very much to all of you in KPMG. Am I heard? Is the voice coming through okay? Excellent. I'm very pleased to be representing SLASCOM, the Industry Association for IT BPM companies. The industry is one of the top 5 earners of foreign exchange. And the industry currently earns USD 1.7 billion in export revenue earnings, employs close to 130,000 people. And our goal is to be USD 5 billion by 2025 in export revenue earnings, employ 200,000 people and have 1,000 startups. We have recently added a new objective to this, and that is to be the world's first green IT BPM destination. The industry has proved very resilient and continued to grow throughout the pandemic and even during the recent economic challenges. We had also several FDIs coming in, Ernst & Young relocating their global delivery center over recent months, even in the midst of all that was going on, was a major plus. And it was good to hear the president's focus in the new economy of export-oriented competitive economy, an environmentally friendly green and blue economy, and a digital economy. All of these resonate with the IT BPM industry. In recognizing the value of exports, the president said the right things: annual growth of 3 billion from new exports, foreign direct investments of more than 3 billion in the next 10 years, creating an internationally competitive workforce. Right? So those are things that we welcome. Coming to the tax exemption, we have enjoyed that in recent years, and this benefited the industry as it was instrumental in attracting large international players, and also helped our member companies continue to invest and grow the business. So expanding internationally requires investment in international marketing, in capacity development, in training, product development. So the tax exemptions were helpful. The removal of the exemption in light of recent economic challenges and the ongoing discussions with IMF was to some extent anticipated. However, there is a provision that continues to remain Right? That is, services rendered in or outside Sri Lanka to any person to be utilized outside Sri Lanka, where the payment of such services is received in foreign exchange, will be exempt. That exemption remains. So this is no different from what has been in place at status quo 2005 to 2018, where professional services were exempt, and that remains. So that is good to see that exemption in place. So this means that the export of IT BPM services will continue to be exempt. However, our membership and our companies also include several companies that provide services locally, and these will now be taxed at 30%. So this is obviously going to be a challenge for these companies that are already grappling with higher wage costs and also their ability to compete for talent. So these companies are key players of digital services to the government and to several local corporates, and the impact on these companies is going to be felt. The ability to further invest, to acquire talent, to acquire new technologies, to keep innovating will be impacted, and the impact remains to be seen. So the export services will continue to be exempt, which is a plus. It will help our companies continue to invest and grow. Our local companies that are providing services locally are going to feel the impact of 30% tax.
Thank you, Jehan. Thank you. Let me move to Tanuja. Tanuja, the recently introduced Social Security Contribution Levy is a tax on the turnover and has an inflationary effect. Shouldn't the policymaker consider increase in tax on value addition rather than introduce tax on turnover, which has a cascading effect?
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this session, and good evening to you all. Yes, answering to your question first, Social Security Contribution Levy, it's a turnover-based tax, and it has the cascading effect. Yet, it's a simple tax. I mean, if you go for value-added tax, again, you have this input mechanism and these refund issues, all this. Because I don't think that government is planning to go with this tax for a long period of time. But as Dr. Roshan correctly said at the very beginning, we have to look into these taxes, newly imposed taxes, in the current context of the country. So, to collect more revenue with a simple tax is the idea behind that. And if you increase VAT rate and remove this, it's not the idea, because with the 2021 budget, this Social Security Contribution Levy was imposed, but at that time the VAT rate was 8. So it is, the concern is that VAT, when the SSCL was introduced, when the VAT rate was at 8. Now the VAT rate is at 15%, but the SSCL still exists. So that is the issue. But I think that it will continue as it is for another maybe 1-2 years at least. But we don't see any chance of amalgamating that with the VAT and increase VAT instead of in place of SSCL. And during this during the Rifka's presentation, she has pointed out 2 things. She pointed out one is that is it okay if I'm taking this chance to answer that 2 issues she raised at that time?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. One is that, yes. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Okay. One is that the appeal hearing time period allocated to the commissioner. The appeal hearing time period allocated, now currently it is open-ended. If you look into the provisions in the Inland Revenue Act, it is open-ended. Commissioner General, there is no time limitation for the Commissioner General to determine an appeal. But the taxpayer is given a chance, the appellant is given a chance to go to the Tax Appeals Commission without waiting for the Commissioner General's determination. That is 7 months period. But the Commissioner General, even if the taxpayer does go to the Tax Appeals Commission, the Commissioner General can wait without giving the decision. So that barrier has been now proposed to be taken out. So Commissioner General is given maximum 2 years period to determine, to make the decision on the administrative review application, and if so, if not decided within that 2 years limit, not only decided and notified to the taxpayer, notified to the appellant. So if it is not notified to the decision is not notified to the appellant, then it will deemed to be allowed as the deemed to be allowed the appeal. So that is one thing. The other thing is that casinos. If you take casino regulation, you know the act is enacted. It was enacted somewhere around 2010, and almost 12 years gone. We were unable to issue regulations and regularize this industry. So now we have taken steps to regulate it, but I don't think it is a comprehensive regulatory mechanism, because there are people who are operating, who are engaging in these businesses without obtaining any sort of license or without getting registration with the Inland Revenue Department. So there are certain legislative barriers placed on them to get registered with the Inland Revenue. So with these proposals, with these proposed changes, intention is to strengthen the regulation. The betting and gaming industry, not only the physically, but online gaming and betting and gaming industry as well. If you look into the technical note, it says expanding the definition of gaming or casino. Gaming coming under the Betting and Gaming Levy Act, and the casinos coming under the Casino Business Regulation Act. So the both acts will be amended to accommodate these online casinos and online betting people as well, and they are supposed to get registered with the system and pay the due taxes. And one other thing is that there are certain operators who are operating these casinos and betting businesses outside Sri Lanka. The people in Sri Lanka can online log into these sites and they can play. So there should be a mechanism where we are trying to get the local guys get registered with the Inland Revenue and bring them under the licensing system. But we unable to catch these people who are running the business from outside Sri Lanka. So we have to have a mechanism to, it's a technological thing. We have to have a mechanism to bar them or prevent them from operating in Sri Lanka. So there are technical things we have to do. So we hopefully we are trying to have a consolidated, comprehensive control regulation for these casinos and betting industries. So that is of the two questions emanated that presentation.
Thank you, Tanuja, for the clarification. Suresh, you have any comments or observation budget proposals before we go to the next question?
Yes, before I give my observations with regard to the overall budget, I'd like to make a comment with regard to what Tanuja pointed out in relation to that 2-year time extension. Now, the process is when a taxpayer receives an assessment under the Inland Revenue Act, there is no appeal. What we have is what is called a request for an administrative review. So when the Act was introduced in 2018, the time given to the Commissioner General was just 3 months, and in the 21 amendment that was extended to 7 months. So like Tanuja pointed out, if the Commissioner General fails to give the determination within 7 months, then the recourse was there to go to the Tax Appeals Commission directly. So now what is happening is the 7-month period is being extended to 2 years. My quarrel with this is going to expedite the tax appellate procedure here. Now, when this used to be 3 months, we were happy because actually going to the Commissioner General was not that productive, because when you analyze the trend, you can see the determinations never come in favor of the taxpayer. You get a favorable decision when you move to the next stage, that is the Tax Appeals Commission. So, sorry? Right, so let me have. So basically now what we have here is an admin review, not an appeal. So it is also basically going directly to a settlement officer and not to the Commissioner General's hearing. So there's a bit of issue. I think we need to discuss this in detail. We'll take it to the next round. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think that was a good discussion, and let us now get to another set of questions. Can I get back to Vish? Vish, there is a general perception that certain businesses may be moving out of Sri Lanka and establish operations in other countries. From the chamber perspective, do you see the trend? And what are the steps the policymakers should take to retain business in Sri Lanka, and do you think it is addressed in the budget? Over to you, Vish.
Yeah, I think good question. I don't think it's a perception. I think it's happening. It's not happening just now. It's just happening more now than before. I think Bangladesh has been a very friendly destination for most Sri Lankan businesses to enter. Most of our banks have ventured out there. Most of our FMCG companies have ventured out there. After all, our economy is very small. With 22 million people, there's only so much growth on a natural basis that you can get in a business in Sri Lanka. So whether the authorities and the budget has answered this and have paid weight, I think in a small way I heard things like, the BOI and the EDB and SLESIC all going to be brought to one is probably a good thing. I heard recently there is a one-stop shop that has been created at the UDA. I hope it's a lot more than just lip service, because usually announcements and then we have lots of functions around these, but then nothing really happens. So I think now we need to really see, effort in making sure that things are made easy for businesses. I mean, the ease of doing index, I think we are out of the charts. So we need to make things easier for businesses to stay here. The regulators have to make sure, the regulations are there to protect businesses, not to make things difficult. I'll just give you an example. I'm close to the tea industry, as you know. Tea blending with multi-origin teas has been a subject for a long time. But many of the tea companies, big brands, left Sri Lanka to go set up shop in UAE and India because, we were tunnel vision. Our regulator was tunnel vision. Our government was tunnel vision. They were not looking beyond, the so-called Ceylon tea. See, the tea is brought as a brand, right? I mean, you can sell so much of Ceylon tea. But today, all those things are being done overseas. I mean, we can argue on this point. Industries, I'm sure, will have different points of view. But, these are the little things that needs to change. We have to change with time. So whether it's a perception, I don't think it's a perception. It is happening. And I don't think it's also, I think it's dynamic. Companies must be encouraged because there's only so much you can do here. If you need to grow, you must allow to go outside, but at the same time, maybe asked to invest here at the same levels or same proportions, etc. So I think that would be the right way to go about it.
Thank you, Vish. Again, moving to Dr. Roshan. I think we touched on this a little bit. High inflation rates are impacting the micro, small and medium enterprise sector, if I call it MSME sector. And in a bid to curb inflation, interest rates are going up, which you see will impact the MSME. And with the economic contracting, these enterprises will find it difficult to survive. Do the budget proposal provide any safety net for the MSME sector? That's the question.
Okay, so the short answer is no. There are no direct subsidies to MSMEs. And I think that was brought up, I think, many times in this forum. The impact that all these different economic challenges or shocks that we have been faced with, how they are affecting the MSMEs. I think they're closing down at a very rapid rate. So there really needs to be something done to protect these industries, because when we want to, closing a business might be easy, but starting up a business takes a lot of effort, a lot of capital, a lot of resources. So I think it is in the interest of the country to really protect not zombie firms, but actually the ones that we want once the economy turns around. But to add to that, of course, we have to acknowledge that social safety net is being put in place to protect households. which will, I mean, a lot of these MSMEs obviously are also headed by, I mean, they are households as well. So there is some kind of safety net being put in place. I think the budget also has increased the allocation to the for direct cash transfers by, I think, another 43 billion. I don't know whether that is going to be adequate to really address the problem that we have and the number of people households that are falling into poverty. But at least that is something. But I think, again, it's how these transfers are allocated is important. But I think the best way really to move a little bit and to say the best way to really protect businesses is, as I said again, short term, is to bring down inflation and to reduce the fiscal deficit. That way we can bring down interest rates and make more money available to the private sector. Because right now we can see there's a huge crowding out of resources because the government is absorbing most of the, whatever domestic resources that are available are being basically being mopped up by or absorbed by the government. But also so in the budget, there is emphasis towards changing attitudes towards entrepreneurship and creating sort of the words are there to create a sort of enabling environment. But I think this needs a sort of a shift in focus. Sorry. I think a lot of the policies so far, our policy cycle has been with this whole electoral cycle. It has been very short-term oriented. We need to have a much more long-term growth and development focus. And we also need to, we cannot keep going back and forth on policies based on these changes in government. So we need to have more consistent policies and with a long-term focus. We also need to move away from policies influenced by, say, lobby groups, special interest groups, and move towards more evidence-based policy making, which are aligned to this long-term, broader vision of the country. I think Vish correctly said, okay, we have a market of only something like 22 million people with a per capita income of less than $4,000. If we are to grow the pie, grow this economy, we have to be producing for the rest of the world. We have to think outward. So all our policies, really, fiscal policy, monetary policy, all our structural reforms really need to focus with how do we incentivize production towards producing for the outside world, or for what we call the tradable sector. And this has not been always the case. When we look at our long-term policy, if you look at policies over the last decade, we can see that this outward orientation has not always been there. We need to be able to compete with the rest of the world. So this requires liberalizing certain sectors of the economy that have for far too long been protected. We have industries, we call them infant industries, but they have never grown up. They continue to remain infant industry. So we really need to move away from this and create a level playing field. Of course, yes, there will be winners and losers in any kind of economic policy reform, but that's how how your businesses grow. If you ask an entrepreneur, they'll tell you how they shut down businesses and then they grow other businesses. So that's exactly how a country also needs to operate. And there is no magic in the success. Now we always quote Vietnam, Bangladesh, and their success, but there's no magic. They have basically grown because they have focused on export, focused and had the right policy focus, because their emphasis has been on growing the export, and therefore they have been able to basically overtake us in multiple times. So I think the rhetoric in the budget speech, I think, indicates this shift in attitude. But I think we need to think of how can we entrench these policies into a sort of medium to long-term framework, so that even if governments change, that those broader policy objectives must remain unchanged. I think we need to think about it together and see how can we bring this sort of a long-term policy focus into the national sort of national planning, so that we don't have these ad hoc policy changes. So yeah, I'll stop there and maybe we can discuss further.
Thank you, Dr. Osra. I think that I fully agree, because I think this will be eye-opener for the country to make sure that there is medium and long-term policies in place so that there won't be any too many changes coming in our policies. Okay, I'm moving now to Jehan. Jehan, I have a question for you. We see significant talent migration in the IT sector and many other professional sectors. How is the IT sector responding to this? And does SLASSCOM have strategies to mitigate this risk? Because this may affect many professionals.
The industry was already facing significant migration of skilled talent. The IT BPM resources are typically very mobile and there is a huge demand globally. So the higher taxes will add to the concerns on disposable income and will further result in brain drain. Right? A recent survey of a subset of some of our membership showed significant increase in attrition, and with a large number in our small survey of a subset, there were over 1,200 staff migrating overseas. So IT skills are in high demand globally, and the key talent is very, very mobile internationally. Concern of our members is the vital middle management layer. These competencies take years to build, and it is this layer that mentors and develops the new entrants. Now, SLASSCOM has a lot of initiatives to create talent. We have an entire capacity and talent focused initiative going across the island. We are looking at so many programs that we have developed to train from the area of kids. Right? We have a program called Tech Kids. Then you have the Future Careers Bridge to convert people who are not in the industry into the industry. So we have a lot of programs, but this middle management layer, retaining them is very, very important. So a number of our member companies have expressed serious concern that this vacuum will be very, very difficult to fill, and this will compromise delivery eventually. So we have done several proposals, and some of these include retain the expenditure deduction. So for things like education, since it's a knowledge-based industry, also for things like transport and for housing, to retain some of those deductions. Some of our other proposals were to increase the slabs and even look at the higher percentage of the taxes. One thing is, we understand that there are limitations. The government has to work with the IMF regulations and so forth, but there is no doubt that there is a very, very steep increase, sometimes well over 100% for some of our employees, and that's a serious concern.
Thanks, Jehan. I'm moving to Shiromal now. Shiromal, due to negative impact on the tourism, many small businesses, individuals focusing on tourism-related activities have been severely impacted. What are the steps being taken by the tourism industries to assist such businesses and individuals? And should the government step in to support business individuals in the tourism sector? Over to you, Shiromal.
Yeah, so that associations, Johan, like the hotels are together or the travel associations, so all of them are helping in the sense, maybe they are using their facilities, their services. Most hotels buy locally from the local producers, so to keep them going. We also help them to negotiate with banks with regards restructuring because their financial literacy is not that great. So giving them that kind of assistance, then even with regards managing their cash flows and trying to budget a little bit. So there are that kind of assistance is given to the small sector, the small and medium players. But I think now from this budget, for instance, they are talking about adventure tourism, sport tourism, marine tourism. That would perhaps help the people in the local areas because most of them are very skilled. I mean, they know their terrain very well. So they can take the people on hiking tours, or they are very familiar with, they dive, they do a lot of water sports. So I think, so in that sense, people in the rural areas will, I think, benefit in sports tourism they're talking of. So that would definitely help, I think, people in those areas with skills, special skills. Nobody has trained them. They are all self-taught. So with a little bit of guidance, and I'm sure the associations and the companies will guide them, I think that should benefit them as well. But whether the government should give subsidies and stuff, I'm personally against subsidies. So I would not ask for subsidies. But if, for instance, the government can maybe negotiate some kind of concessionary funding, like for example, ADB has given, I think at 8%, 10 million through 10 banks. So that kind of funding, if they can get at subsidized rates and give to banks, that would definitely help the people to survive, especially in another year or two, this high tax interest regime.
Thank you, Shiromal. I'm now moving to Jonathan. Jonathan, I think we touched on the expected haircuts on ISBs, but I think, are you getting clarity on the proposed tax treatment for increased impairment provisions, including provision for expected haircut ISBs? It's not happening, I believe.
Not yet. I was actually planning to try and negotiate a meeting with Tanuja over this call, actually, to see whether we can arrange. We've been trying to get a meeting for some time because, you know, it's been a while that since IFRS came. You know that basically provisions wasn't allowable, I think, for tax deduction all this time. And then suddenly when it comes to collective impairment and ISL, for the last so many years, we have not got, you know, that it's not tax allowable, and all of us are carrying a fairly significant deferred tax element on our balance sheet. So obviously looking forward to an early meeting with IRT as well as maybe with the Ministry of Finance, with FC, to see how we can, you know, come to this, because with the moratoriums coming to an end, and as I said, people trying to get back on their feet, it's going to be obvious that staging is going to take place and that impairments are going to increase. And sort of these are impacting capital. At the same time, if you're not getting, you know, your tax, you know, if these are not made tax allowable, it's going to have a huge impact on our liquidity as well as, because we pay, the cash outflow is almost immediate, right? And then we just need to sort of hold on until we get an opportunity to reverse, which can be quite a long time. So we are hopeful that this comes through, in addition to Johan, maybe if things get tough, like I was kind of alluding to, with the help of the government and the regulatory authority, to see that the MLAs like ADB, World Bank, IFC can come up with a kind of banking stability fund or sustainability fund, which acts as a contingency, which comes, you know, to provide liquidity just in case of need, to ensure that we keep confidence in the banking system, you know, quite high. You know. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Suresh, you have any comments?
Yeah, with regard to this, I think the issue that Jonathan raised, yes, it should be discussed with the policymakers, and some kind of equitable solution should be arrived at. So I think that should happen sooner than later. Yeah, with regard to that.
Okay, thank you. I think we can go on and on, but time is catching up. So I'm sure our viewers benefited from the insightful discussion, and we wish to thank all the panelists. On behalf of KPMG, we wish to thank each of you for joining our budget analysis. Very special thanks to our eminent panelists for their valuable insights, and I'm sure the viewers enjoy the diverse views expressed. We at KPMG will continue to add value to our clients and community. Over to you, Nipuni.
Thank you very much. And once again, a very big thank you to our panelists. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your views. We want to also thank our audience. We're very sorry we had so many questions coming in. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, so we can't really take up all those questions. But we would be happy to understand your concerns, and please do send those in so that we can continue to help you, as KPMG always does. Its team of professionals gets together and understands the problems, is able to analyze and present the highlights and the analysis for these budget proposals. Of course, all of you understand and all of you agree that the road to recovery and resilience is a long, hard journey ahead of us. All of you have joined us today to understand our views and the views of our panelists. the views of our clients as a whole, to take not just their individual industries forward, but Sri Lanka's economy forward as a whole. So we at KPMG, as we have been called upon for the last 2 decades, intend to walk with our clients in partnership down this long road. We intend to continuously develop ourselves as the clear choice for our clients and to be the market leader in Sri Lanka as always. So, ladies and gentlemen, here's hoping that you've enjoyed and you are taking away some fruitful insights into the budget highlights, so budget proposals for 2023. Thank you and congratulations to the KPMG team of professionals for such professional and successful analysis of the budget speech for 2023. And we hope that all of you join together and walk towards this road to resilience and recovery in the year ahead. Thank you once again. It's a very good night from the KPMG team.